Hello and welcome back to the program. My name is Michael Finney. Today I am joined by T.R. Hudson. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm T.R. Hudson. I'm a writer. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get into some of your background as a writer. Tell us how you came into it and what you're trying to do with the word.
I've been kind of writing short stories for a few years now. I came to Twitter, I think it was 2021, maybe. That sounds about right. A couple of years ago, anyway. And I heard Zero HP Lovecraft on a podcast, much like this one. And he was describing his process and how he became a writer, let's say, if one can become one, like if there's a sort of transformation to who you are when you declare yourself a writer. He became a writer when he heard that Murakami was at a baseball game and decided, I could probably write stories, and then he started putting his stuff out there. So, in a long roundabout way, Murakami going to a baseball game is the reason why I put my writing online and why I kind of found a pseudonym and a avatar and all this, and I do the whole Twitter thing.
Had you considered yourself a creative in advance of writing?
Not particularly, actually. I was, my younger brother. He's very creative. He's very artistic, and I thought, okay, that's what a creative is. I'm not that. I started writing in college because I had to take a couple courses, and people were like, "Oh, this stuff's pretty good. You should, post this somewhere." And I never did. I sat on a lot of my work for a while, and then ended up getting the courage to start a Substack and put my work out there and annoy people into reading them, which people have been very generous with their time and their thoughts when it comes to my writing.
What do you consider to be maybe the scaffolding or background for the work that you're doing?
The scaffolding or the back. Life experience to not get too deep into that in terms of who I am in real life. I definitely take a lot of inspiration from events from my life, whether it's a few tragedies and tragic deaths that have occurred within my life, family, friends, the like. Most people have these kinds of things. Not to say that they aren't tragic, but they are common, and that almost increases the tragedy in a lot of ways. But it's funny, we were talking before the show a little bit, and you said that you don't read a lot, and I joked that I don't either, but I actually do read quite a bit, and probably the scaffolding of my writing is just cribbing and stealing from better writers than myself.
Fair. In all honesty, I do read quite a bit. This year particularly, I've been doing a lot more writing, but in the past, have been ripping through some stuff. I have collections of the books that I read up on YouTube if you're ever interested in looking at some of that stuff.
No, I definitely am. The one thing that I like more than reading books is talking about books. Makes me feel smart.
Well, let's talk about that. Whether or not we're all moons in that conversation. Tell us some of your favorites, if you like.
Some of my favorites. Let's see. Have you ever read Matterhorn by Karl Marlantes?
I haven't.
It's a book about the Vietnam War. He was an officer in Vietnam, and then he wrote his memoir, basically a fictionalized memoir, like 30 years later. So that's a fantastic book. Let's see. I liked The Quiet American by Graham Greene, which is also set in Vietnam before the war. The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Very good book.
But basically all of McCarthy's work. I'm a big fan of. I mean, I could just list off, reams and reams of names. Have you ever read anything by Tobias Wolff?
I don't think so. The name isn't familiar.
Yeah, so he's got a few different books. Old School probably being his most famous. It's about like an all boys prep school, and they meet various writers because they have like a relationship with various famous writers of the time, and they have speak to these prep school boys. It's a pretty good book. I think it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize a few years ago. And then probably my favorite book is Stoner by John Williams.
Yeah, that one's come up in the group chat a little bit. Is there?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm probably the one. I'm probably the one that was bringing it up. I think it. Yeah, and I'm not the only one who says this, by the way. So when I say this, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But there are a lot of people who think it is a perfect novel, and they use the word perfect, um, deliberately and not flippantly.
Which they shouldn't. Words
Yeah.
are powerful things. Are there themes inside of the books that you like, that draw you in or captivate you, make you think that a piece is elevated amongst the collection?
Certain themes, no. It's funny. I started reading Aristotle's Poetics. I haven't gotten very deep into it, but one of the things that I take away from it is this idea of theme. And I can't say that there's a specific theme that resonates with me or that I take a lot from, but if it's yeah, I'll crib Hemingway, and if it's good and true and beautiful, then I like it.
So when you started writing and getting into that aspect of the craft, what were you trying to do?
I was trying to exorcise some demons that I had. My first book, Automaton. Uh, there's a few characters in the book that are too familiar to myself, and I was trying to make sense of life in a lot of certain ways. One of the things, I can't write nonfiction, so if I tried to like do a memoir or something of my life, I couldn't do it. One, I don't find myself all that interesting. I find making things up a little bit more interesting, but there's some truths that you can't get to by relaying facts as they actually happened or as you perceive them to happen. If you kind of go down the postmodern route, um, only fiction can kind of bring about certain truths about life and about existence itself. Uh, except scripture, actually, but I don't want to kick that hornet's nest.
That's all right. We're friends here. We're allowed to go wherever we like.
No,
I do want to.
I have
Go ahead.
I used to have a problem with people kind of throwing their belief in my face and drowning people in their belief. And I try to be conscious of doing that myself now that I have found God, but while also not denying Him. So it's it's a little it's a little difficult to cross that beam.
Yeah, no sweat. I want to round back to the piece you were talking about a little bit in regards to fiction and nonfiction and truth and biography, right? And the idea that the creative act is oftentimes autobiographical. And even though you are writing fiction, you initially utilize that as an aspect to exercise your demons that way. And even if you don't necessarily feel that nonfiction in the biographical sense is a fitting trajectory for you, you're still exploring that that aspect through your writing, right?
Oh, most definitely. Like, okay, so here's an example. I have a short story about a widower at a funeral who has Alzheimer's, and he has no idea why he's there, and he's trying to piece it all together uh, by himself without trying to alarm anybody. And little things come back to him until he realizes where he is, what he's doing, and then he loses it again. I mean, that's based off of something that I witnessed in my life, you know. But since I didn't directly experience it, I had to fictionalize the account. And also, in order to give it in order to evoke the emotions that I wanted evoked by the reader, in that I had to twist and change things and make certain dialogue fit here and there, and uh, in order to get the response that I'm kind of looking for from the reader. So these things happened,
Sure.
but not the way that I put them out there.
Well, let's dive into that, because even when we do write biographically or autobiographically, it is just our perspective, and as soon as somebody else reads that, they're going to recount their perception on it, which may be vastly different than our own.
Right, right. I guess the reason that I stay away from nonfiction writing, and to be fair, I mean, like Joan Didion, and new journalism and all that in the '60s and '70s, it kind of blurred the lines, and Norman Mailer actually to an earlier and probably to a different extent. There's a lot of blurring of the lines of fiction and nonfiction in the 20th century, and I don't think that we've kind of I don't see us doing anything with that these days. It's just kind of, it's there now, and nobody's in the 21st century. At least I haven't seen uh, anyone kind of build off of that. But I like the idea that at any moment somebody can kick down the door and it can be a dinosaur or something. You know what I mean? Like just something completely out of left field that can't really happen in nonfiction work, because of course that didn't actually happen. Um, and I usually try to keep my stories pretty grounded, but with the idea kind of like this sword of Damocles over my head of anything can happen next. Uh, Whereas, nonfiction, there's more rules, I feel like, and I just don't like them.
Yeah, that's all fair. I think maybe some of what you're getting at in regards to the postmodern aspect is in opposition to straight reporting, right? And that's a point that I try to delineate, what is reporting and what is journalism. To me, they are not the same thing. I don't want to give the title of journalist to somebody that I think is just a reporter. And at the same time, I don't want to undermine the art of journalism by calling it merely reporting. I think that they're vastly different.
And that's something that we probably disagree on. I think that I think journalism is like to call journalism an art is like saying that a Civil War surgeon is an artist, especially the way that journalism is done today. I would rather there just be reporters, because it is dealing with something that is true, or at least is trying to it's trying to report what is perceived of as true, whereas journalism might as well just be another word for propaganda. And maybe it's because I can't write propaganda very well, but I find it distasteful.
So yeah, I think that there is at least nominally some disconnect between our ideas there, in the sense that, to me, journalism is long form, right? That we have photojournalism, or video journalism in the documentary sense, right? That to me requires very long arcs, and not necessarily that there needs to be strong narrative. Maybe it benefits from that, maybe it doesn't, that's on a case by case basis. But in the sense that when we're just in a moment, right, and we've captured a short view of something, if you are a reporting photographer and you just go to the scene and you get a couple of photos and that's put into a periodical or a blog or anything like that, to me, again, that's just reporting and not necessarily giving a longitudinal look at more introspection in regards to the topic, which elevates it to that space of journalism. For me, that's how I use the term. So, everybody.
Right. And I get that. I think that there is a time and place maybe for that kind of deep dive, but I mean, just most of it is so hacky, and straight up lies. I mean, hell, like, do you remember Making a Murderer? It was like this big Netflix documentary series. It was like the first Netflix documentary series.
Right. I didn't watch that, but I'm familiar with it existing.
Yeah, I didn't really watch it either, because I'm not really into like true crime. But
yeah.
Over at the Daily Wire, they're doing this sort of this is what Making a Murderer got wrong, and then you have to question, okay, well, what is the stake that the Daily Wire has in trying to debunk this documentary, and what is the documentary itself trying to show or hide? And it never comes to truth, right?
Right.
And the more it seems like the more popular something, or the more popular things in that genre are always going after narrative and spectacle and a message, rather than trying to figure out the truth about something.
Yeah, I think a lot of what's happening inside of that kind of work is to leave it in this superposition, right? This kind of Schrodinger cat scenario where it's like, okay, well, from my point of view, it's this thing. Well, from my point of view, it's this thing. And it's really kind of like, where did you come to it from? And again, that's less valuable to me.
Right. Well, and I mean, but let's look at the other side too, right?
All right.
There's that documentary that Mencius Moldbug always talks about, Audio Africa. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't.
It's a documentary about these Italian journalists are filming Africa in the last days of colonialism and like the first days of home rule, and just how like monstrous these countries become after the colonists leave, and the order that they brought leaves. Right, that's something that is clear. Like, whether it's reflecting reality, it will never convince somebody who thinks that colonialism is bad. Right, it's only because they're only the criticism of it will be that it's only showing the worst. That there could have been tens of thousands of hours of footage of children playing in the streets and having a grand old time, and then hanging out with grandpa around the fire, and that doesn't get put in the movie. They only put in what is sensational. I don't typically believe that for that particular movie, but I also have my opinions about the continent of Africa and colonialism more generally. It's when you take a camera and you point it at something, the field is always narrowed. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So to put, so to,
Definitely.
so to,
Absolutely.
to pass that off as, because I think the problem is that journalism has grafted itself onto the truth. So to say that if journalists would stop trying to claim that they're telling the truth, I'd probably be more fine with them.
Let's transition into your work again. Let's talk lightly about Automaton, because I haven't read it and it's sitting on my nightstand. Obviously I'm going to read it because I bought the thing, but, can you give us maybe a bird's eye view of what it's about, what you're trying to do, who it's for, that kind of thing, without spoiling it for me?
Sure. So in Automaton, you have main character Michael Connors, who is a recruiter in a post-fall United States. He's basically a slaver who is running around collecting people in this sort of post-apocalyptic America, rounding people up to fight in an army founded by the one sort of state that is kind of coalescing in New York, New Jersey. Michael is he's an enhanced person because he used to be a soldier. He was given a sort of biomedical implant that allows him to turn off his feelings. However, he is wounded in combat to the point that he no longer can turn off the biomedical implant, so that he is now in a state of complete unfeeling. And it's his adventures through the American wasteland.
Yeah, sounds good. I, read the description and said, I want to read this. I appreciate you not going too into depth. Obviously, you don't want to give it away either. The value is in actually reading it.
No, definitely not. And I mean, I'm happy that you read it, or you read the description and thought that was something you wanted to read, because I'm learning how to market, but I didn't know how to market then. I didn't know how to entice people into actually reading this stuff. And luckily, I've had a few good friends who've read it and reviewed it and said very kind things about it.
Let's transition to your newest book. You just released it last month, The Perfect and the Wicked, the follow-up, the sequel to Automaton, they're saying.
It's not. It's that's a joke between myself and Aristophanes. He's probably the biggest Automaton fan, which is cool because he's like a huge Twitter person. So when somebody with like 100,000 followers loves your book, that's always one, good for business, but also just it's cool that cool people like your stuff. But he's been clamoring for the sequel for a while, and I was working on the sequel, and I got bored and kind of pissed at it, and I didn't want to work anymore because I felt obligated. So I started writing this, and it's basically a fictionalized biography of the Kennedy patriarch, Joseph P. Kennedy, his rise and fall, as well as the rise and fall of his children in the 20th century.
So where did you get interested in that topically and choose to write about it?
I mean, I've always been, I'm a huge conspiracy guy. I don't know, maybe it's my love of narratives and making things fit exactly perfectly that make conspiracy theories attractive to me, because real life isn't as clean as a good conspiracy theory can be, and most of the time I think that there's at least some truth to them. So the Kennedy assassination has always kind of been in the back of my mind as something that I wanted to write about. Um, and as I started researching more and more, I realized that, oh, the John F. Kennedy, he's not the star of this show. He's not the most interesting person, but his father certainly is. His father is like the American Faust in a lot of ways. He makes so many
Sure.
deals with the devil to get his ends met, only for disaster to befall not only himself, not only his children, but his children's children and his grandchildren's children, and like just the whole Kennedy curse is fascinating to me. And then you couple that with the idea of Catholics running America right now. That's pretty topical with not only Joe Biden, who is nominally Catholic in the White House, but Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s running for president. And I don't know how Catholic he is either, but he's a friggin' Kennedy, so that's always interesting, at least.
So you got 2 books under your belt. You're a short story writer. Anything else inside of that personal space that you have that we should know about?
Yeah, I am 1/3 of the Double Dealer, which is a literary magazine revived. It was a 1920s literary magazine from the South. Uh, Myself and J.L. Mackey and PCM Christ have revived it, and we just released issue 10 with stories featured from myself, from Mr. Paul Fahrenheit, Caleb Caudle, who wrote The Neighbor and is probably one of the best novels of our sphere. Brad Kelly wrote for us as well, from the Art of Darkness podcast. Shimmy's Art, who not only does he do the cover art for our magazines, but he actually wrote a story, and a damn good one, in this most recent issue. And a few other people have written for us. And we're taking submissions for issue 11. So please follow us, follow the Double Dealer on Twitter to get information about how to submit, when to submit. And we do pay our writers and artists. That's the one thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to get it monetarily viable so that we can pay all the writers and artists that submit to us. We, the editorial staff, don't really, yeah, actually not even really, we don't take any money from this. Maybe down the line, if we get famous and it gets more wider readership, we might give ourselves a couple bucks, but for now, we're definitely not taking any money out of it. So yeah, read the Double Dealer. The short story that I submitted to and this is a little inside baseball for your listeners. Michael, you and I are in a group chat with a particular Mr. Mazer Rackham Jr., and he and I have been cross, let's say. And we had a short story contest. I think I blew his story out of the water. The judges didn't think so. It turned out to be a tie, but that story is in Double Dealer 10. So if you like that story, or you're interested in sort of a Kafkaesque nightmare in New York City, purchase Double Dealer 10.
I'm going to say a couple of things here. I read both of the stories. I was unhappy with the unresolved nature of the judging. I would have liked for them to declare a clear winner inside of that, not only for the consequences, but just in general. There were things that I liked about both stories, and I even said this in the group chat in regards to the technical writing craft. I think Mazer really killed that. But in regards to storytelling and something that captivated me in terms of reading it as a reader, as somebody who is appreciating fiction more and more over the last handful of years, your story gets at a lot of the things that I like, and it is in that kind of Philip K. Dick territory to me. Maybe you don't see it that way, but I do.
Right. And I mean, like, the whole reason that I did that and antagonized Mazer as much as I did is because he's in a writers group chat and he didn't seem to be producing anything. So I was sort of bullying him into producing something, and he produced something great. It's legitimately a very good story, and I annoyed that out of him. So either way, I knew when I went into this, because I declared the duel, let's say, and when I went into this thinking, either way, I come out on top. Either I just wipe the floor with him and I show how great I am, which I like because I have a big ego, or I annoy this guy into meeting me at my level, which I think is a very high level, but whatever. And getting out of him something pretty good, which he met the challenge. So either way, I won.
Right. And I think that, for somebody who's only been in that chat for maybe 6 months or so, to me, I'm not a strong fiction writer. To explore the craft and be able to bounce around, themes and concepts and just the technicalities, and then also reading recommendations is highly valuable to me as well. So, I don't know the deep lore between you guys, the two of you, but at the same time, it is something that I take note of. There is an eclectic mix of creatives within that chat, and to me, I think that it is valuable to prod the folks into production, whether it is with a carrot or a stick. I think, Mazer is specifically, video oriented, and for him to get into the written word more than that sphere, as a fictional teller, as opposed to an observer who is exploring other people's works. And I don't know everything that he's done. I have watched, I think, all of the videos, or if not all of them, the majority of the videos on his YouTube channel. He does a great job. There's, I think, a lot of value in participating in groups like that, whether it is, in a rolling kind of text chat kind of way, or even just verbal group chats, which I'm an advocate for. So it's helped me because, initially when I joined the group, it was really about the technical craft aspect, but I have finished a story, and I'm a slow writer. I write a lot of other stuff, but in terms of fiction, it is hard for me. And to be able to, not have a deadline, but at the same time, maybe some sort of, I don't have a good word for it, but just folks that are interested or compelled to check in regards to production and stuff like that is useful. And so, I appreciate that.
Oh, I mean, it's good to have accountability. Definitely.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Some sense of accountability in that way.
So when I was writing The Perfect and the Wicked, my friend who I do double dealer with, PCM Christ, he was starting he had gotten a start on his novel before I did. And I said, okay, let's have drafts done by 4th of July, let's say, because we both wanted to get our stuff out by fall. And I missed that deadline. He definitely missed that deadline. And he's still working on his first draft. But it was even the idea of an arbitrary deadline, and even just setting yourself an arbitrary deadline to have something done, even if it's not good, even if it's not done, giving yourself a timeline to get it done really does, at least for me, it helps get the creative juices flowing. The pressure of having a timeline, of having a release date in mind, helps me kind of focus. Because otherwise, I'd just be sitting on my laptop, scrolling on my phone, and just goofing off, and then never getting any writing done. Which, to be fair, I mean, I do most of the time. That's the one thing I haven't learned yet, is a writer's discipline to write every single day and treat it like a job.
Right. Yeah, that's tough. What have you learned about being a publisher that you might be able to share?
Oh, that's I've learned a lot about marketing from Dan Baltic and Billy Pratt, who both wrote books for Terror House Press, who was their publisher, but they have to kind of do their own marketing. And if you've seen Dan Baltic's tweets, they're usually him degrading one of his junior associates because he's a lawyer, right? Or telling people about his book Nutcracker in various ways, usually through sexual innuendo. And Billy Pratt does much the same with his book Welcome to Hell. He'll just pull a headline, right? Some egregious thing, like some horrible thing that you never picture a human doing. And then just right under, he just says "Welcome to Hell," and then posts a link for his book, and that's done very well for him as well. I haven't really been able to meme my books yet, but once I do, I think I'll be unstoppable.
Are there any other points? Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, editing is tough. There's a lot of mistakes in Automaton. I think there are fewer mistakes in The Perfect and the Wicked. But even just like, even just building a book out of a manuscript, I won't say it's tough, but there was a learning curve to it. I self-publish on Amazon, and they don't really do you a whole lot of favors in terms of making sure that what you want on the page comes out the way you want it. So there's a lot of trial and error there. But once you kind of figure it out, and to people who maybe don't have that kind of time, or might not be as detail oriented, and yeah, I say this completely as somebody who is not at all detail oriented. I had in the first draft of this novel, I had 3 different names for one of the characters because I kept bouncing back and forth, and I had to go back and fix it. And right before I published, I missed one, so that was a little embarrassing because I'd already sent out the manuscript for people to read and blurb it. So yeah, if you're going to self-publish, you have to be pretty detail-oriented, or at least make yourself be, even if you're not normally.
Absolutely. The value of KDP is the ability to drop in a new version as well. And if you do that with the ebook side, I think people get that new update. If you do it with the paperback, then, they have limited editions, I suppose, in a sense.
No. So there are a handful of people out there who have a limited edition Automaton where the margins don't make any sense, and there's a lot of spelling mistakes. The friend of mine, well, I mean, kind of a friend. I haven't really talked to him in a while, but he helped me out a lot with Automaton, so he's my friend. Rogue Scholar Press did the formatting for Automaton that you see now in the 6x9, and really appreciative of him doing that, because he certainly didn't have to. And actually, it was Zero HP Lovecraft who was the mediator for us there. So very kind of both of them, and that's the thing too. It's writing is hard, and it's easier when you have friends. But so on the one hand, having a lot of friends in this sphere is good, and being in group chats with other writers is very helpful to get eyes on your work, to get ideas, bounce ideas off of people, and also just help broadcast your message out there. But then there's the flip side as well. There's this sort of culture of glad handing, of not wanting to rock the boat if you think something is crap, because you might offend somebody, which I mean, just kind of because of the times we live in, it's people take offense easily. But I also don't think that people know how to give good criticism either. So it'll almost always come off it personally.
Right.
So there's a weird there's a weird bridge that we're gonna have to cross as self-published writers to filter out some crap and put out a more superior version. Because I mean, we're some of the books that I've read from Frog Twitter, let's say, or whatever you want to call it, are much better than what's being put out by New York Times bestseller lists and the big five publishing firms, and even some classics I've read. To be completely honest, there's some really good work out there.
Definitely.
But a lot of it is not, and a lot of it just feels and reads half-assed and half-baked, and that's not gonna give us any legitimacy, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. I think, for me, there were two examples that got me or guided me into self-publishing. One of which, was a business-oriented, sales-oriented, kind of self-help piece from a guy that I know who I've had on the program in the past. But specifically, I think inside of the Twitter sphere, Delicious Tacos, Finally Some Good News, is an outstanding work to me. It does what I think is exceptional work in terms of storytelling, and it's fun.
Yeah, and I mean his work is I like Delicious Tacos. I think I ran a writer's workshop maybe a year ago, year and a half ago at this point, and I used one of his shorts as sort of as one of the homework assignments. It was called The Soap, and I think that Delicious Tacos, what he does well, he does really well. But I think some of his work kind of is one note. But that's also, like who am I to? There's a little bit of who the hell are you to say this about somebody else? You've sold what? I've sold 300 copies of my book. He sold thousands. And not to say that sales is the measure of quality that we should be kind of putting ourselves up against, but he's been doing this for a while, and even if you're not very good, which I'm not saying he is bad or anything, but if you've been doing something for a long time, even if you're not very good, you still know a lot.
Right. There's an important part that you're kind of dialing into, but maybe haven't mentioned specifically here in terms of that long, arduous arc that a writer goes on, where the specific space that he is born out of and where he has gotten to more recently, I would say in the last 5 years, he was a regular blogger, pushing something, I think, every Sunday for years and years in total obscurity, I would say, besides that very niche collective, to where now he's kind of attained some level of cultural purchase, I would say. Certainly not within the New York Times conversation, but I don't think that that's, an establishing line of credibility or anything. And certainly there are lots
Certainly
of,
not anymore.
right. And, I don't, arguably, if ever, for him too, as you mentioned, he has sold a lot of books, and I think he has to write. I think he, innately needs to express through the written word. But obviously, second to that is some level of financial success or notoriety that goes along with being some level of public. And that's, it's that 10-year overnight success quip that I think he embodies notably that way.
Yeah, I mean, he also has a writer's appetite for beautiful women, and nothing. And I say this as a married man, but there are a lot harder ways to get women to think that you're funny and interesting than writing. Usually, it involves making millions, if not billions, of dollars.
Are there any last thoughts or things that you need to express here today that we didn't get to touch on?
No. I mean, I think we about covered everything. I'd say, I don't know. Go read The Double Dealer. You can read my books too. That's fine. But Double Dealer is that thing. I think it's because I'm working with other people on it that I really want that to be a success. My books, I mean, I know the measure of my books, but my friends are writing in it, and I want them to get more notable in this thing of ours. So yeah, go read The Double Dealer.
Well, Hudson, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.